Well, thank you for joining us. It's great to see so many people here. One thing that I would like to remind us all is, with all the technology going on, with all the talks about AI going on, to keep the human in mind center, the human needs that we have, and especially the needs of humans that are in underrepresented groups. Stefanie, you founded an initiative. What were the challenges that you observed and the structural problems that made you found your initiative?
So we are working with domestic violence, which a lot of people don't really know what it is. Domestic violence is a pattern. It starts never with physical violence, but more than with psychological violence. And it steals safety, it steals freedom, it steals maybe your life when you're murdered. And domestic violence is one of the biggest challenges we have in our world, because 1 in 3 women are affected in the world. You have to think about that, how many women are affected. And in Germany, around 85% of the cases in front of court are dismissed because there are no evidence for that. So this is what we are challenging with our app.
Speaking about evidence, that is a topic, Christiana, you're smiling. This is a topic close to your heart as well. How are the people that you support affected by evidence, proving evidence?
Yeah. So in our work with Statefree, what we focus on is the issue of statelessness. So our work revolves around the lives of people who are without nationality, because statelessness describes the status of a person who is not recognized as a citizen by any nation state. And a lot of you who might have a citizenship, you have evidence of the fact that you are recognized by a nation state, and that is your passport. And stateless people don't have a passport, and that is something that they're lacking, so they don't have evidence for who they are. But what is even worse is not even that document, but actually what this document gives you access to, because without the passport, as a stateless person, you might not be able to access public health, you might not be able to access education, you don't have any access to identity documentation, you don't have the right to open a bank account, to work, to get married at some point, to vote, so you have like zero impact on what is happening on a political level, and you have zero impact on how to make sure that the evidence that you're lacking by a state at some point actually is provided for you.
And I think the most important point for what you're looking at is also to consider that it's different from state to state. So we both are from Germany. Christiana and I were both born in Germany. I have German parents, so I could prove that they were German, I was German. I have a passport, I'm a citizen, Christiana's not. Yeah. But the difference, there's no difference. We're both born there. I know in the United States it's different. So if you're born in the United States, as up to now, depending on what goes on, you get the citizenship. But for every country, it's different, how to that. So what we would also like to discuss today is, because it's a technology conference, there are areas where technology can help us to solve these solutions. Maybe Stefanie, you want to start, how you started looking at technology and how it can help you.
As I said earlier, that there are 85% of the cases are dismissed in front of court, although we know that the violence in relationships are happening. So I looked at the numbers, and I was really shocked that the official numbers is that only every 215th case of domestic violence is official at the police. So this is what shocked me as well, that we live in a society where a lot of people actually think this is normal to be that a woman is affected by domestic violence or affected by gender-based violence. And I thought you have to change that, especially in a time of technology and digitalization. So I won the hackathon of the federal government back in 2020. They did it because of COVID. And we developed an app together with the Federal Ministry of Justice and the Federal Ministry of Interior, which was a one-time thing, or the first thing that ever happened, because normally domestic violence is very centered in the Ministry of Family and the Ministry of Social stuff. And the problem is that we wanted it to be a matter of national security, which we actually did. So we're now funded by the government, the Ministry of Interior, and we are offering the first disguised app. So it's camouflage. You don't see it on the phone. So all the people affected by gender-based violence can use it, and it's hidden on the phone, and they can use it at night at 2 o'clock when all the counseling centers are closed, for example. And the partner will never see it, never hear it. So what we offer in this app is that we are giving them information about what to do, what domestic violence is, what the structure is of domestic violence, also what rights they have, psychologically rights, where to go, what to pack when you want to leave your partner. But the main thing we do is that we offer a diary where it's safe to document all of the violence, and it's actually holding up in court. And we do that so successfully that Germany is now the first country who implements it, but now we have a second country in Europe who wants to implement it. And yeah.
And did that come out of because you said you need evidence and so many cases are dismissed. What were the core reasons, or are the core reasons, why the cases are dismissed?
Most of the times it's because there's no evidence, but also because women are never believed. There is this saying of that people who are affected by a sexualized violence, for example, people say it's because they're jealous or they want fame. I mean, look at the Weinstein cases. And we have that in partnerships as well, especially with domestic violence when the partner is a famous person, for example. We have these cases in public, but no one believes the woman. No one believes the person who is affected. And I think it's not only a political problem, but it's also a problem of the society and the world, that people need to know that they all know, you all know, people who are affected. When you walk through the streets every morning, every third woman, you have to imagine that, how many people are affected. It's just
I don't want to think about it. We're 3 women up here. Documentation, Christiana. What role does documentation play for your cause?
Documentation plays a large role. I think what is very abstract, it sounds very abstract, having documents. Oftentimes the issue of statelessness is kind of equated with being without papers, which always sounds so weird because it sounds as if stateless people have zero evidence of the fact that they exist. And that's where there is this tension between what is existence versus what is identity, because what is happening with stateless people is basically there is a group of 15 million people worldwide who are affected by statelessness, and we have created a world which is structured in nation states. So we created something which is called citizenship to make sure that every individual should be tied to a nation state. But at the same time, this system actually has gaps, and those gaps were created by a system that forces you or obliges people to have documentation about who they are. But the interesting part is there's only one institution in this world that can give you that documentation, and that is the state. So the state doesn't give you the documents that you need to prove that you exist, but at the same time, the state is asking you to prove to them that you don't have the documents, right? So when it comes to documents, it's very interesting because I feel like especially those who do have documents actually don't even value those documents as much as stateless people would. Because for stateless people, they have learned the hard way that whatever they want to access, however they want to embrace their life, however they want to create a life in dignity and also freedom, it is always tied to the question of, you say you are somebody, you say that you are maybe based or from a country, but that country doesn't really recognize you. And I think it's also very important because statelessness is often mistaken for migration. A stateless person is not necessarily the same as a refugee. 70% of the stateless people worldwide live in the country that they were either born in or grew up in. If we look at Germany, we have a number of 124,000 stateless people in Germany. 36,000 of them were born in the country. We still have people who are over 65 who were born stateless in Germany. And at the same time, Germany is not acknowledging the fact that they haven't gotten any documentation from the country that they were born in.
Yep. I mean, it sounds like a real catch-22. So how are you going to solve that? And how can technology help you with that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to our work, I really have to say that the role of technology evolved. Like the foundation of it was actually very simple because you mentioned already I have lived experience of statelessness, so I was born stateless in Germany. And how the journey of Statefree started was that I tried to find out through the internet how, as a stateless person, I would be able to travel, for example, and I couldn't find that information. So when we started Statefree, technology played a role in making sure that there is some transparency. So the first thing we did was actually more focused around community. So we launched the first online forum for stateless people because statelessness is very isolating, but then I learned that there are 15 million people affected, so why is it so isolating? We could share with each other what is happening. But that has evolved. So now we know that what we want is for stateless people to get access, and this access is created by policies. So now that we have evolved more in the direction of political innovation, technology plays actually a different role. And I think what is very important is it sounds counterintuitive, but in order to reduce statelessness, you first have to acknowledge that statelessness exists. And that sounds weird, but like the essence is that we have conventions, international legislation that decides or defines how stateless people should be protected on the territory that they are. But those conventions only apply to stateless people if they have proven that they are stateless. They don't have to prove they're not recognized by any of the 195 countries. So how can technology help us? I mean, the problem right now is that in many countries, also in Germany, there is no procedure, there's no structure, no process that explains to stateless people, but also to local administrations, how do you prove something you don't have? So technology can support us in creating that process, at least to a certain extent. But then at the same time, it's always a double-edged sword, or it's always a two-way street. Technology can enable us to build that structure, but at the same time, we need to have the framework, and that is legal. That is a legal framework policy. So what we often deal with is we are now building the vision of how that could look like, but we also need to make sure that there's a political will to then also implement it.
So you're talking about the steps that you need to take on the federal level, federal government level, I would say, because it didn't, yeah. Stefanie, you said you're funded by the Ministry of the Interior, which is also on federal level, but when you roll out your solution, how does it work on a local level, local government level?
So I think the hardest part was to get the federal ministry to fund us and to actually accept that domestic violence is a national security problem. That was the first really big problem, but we solved it. And now we have 16 states in Germany and 16 different rules, 16 different leaders of those states. So what we do, because we're working very closely with all the institutions who are working in this states, because we also provide sensitivity training for those, so they can actually see and spot domestic violence, even though the person who is affected maybe doesn't even articulate it. So the problem is with the states is that you actually have to talk to everyone again, to actually tell them again that it's a national security problem, and then to basically have someone, especially on the states level, to say, okay, we want to try it, because technology, especially in Germany, and we all know it probably, is not the highest on the priority list. And especially with an app which is camouflaged on the government side, obviously, of the government side. So everyone is really, they never heard of a camouflage app, an app which is hidden, you can't see it, and provides the functions we are providing, because it never existed. We are the first ones who does that, or who do that. And I think that, especially in the times with a flash or a backlash of the feminist movement, we experience when you look into the US, for example, who actually tried to demolish the women's rights and to Sometimes when I read the newspapers, I actually think we are in the middle of an episode of Black Mirror or The Handmaid's Tale. So what makes me happy is that a second country wants to have the app, and that everyone is actually recognizing that domestic violence is a problem. I mean, as Christiana said, you actually have to prove and to have the country, the government actually realizing that they have a problem to actually do something against it. Yes.
Yeah, I can appreciate how a second state who sees the need for a solution like you offer can help you domestically. Christiana, I know you're also working with the European network. Do you have similar synergies that you see when you work with other countries?
I mean, one of the main issues that we're facing with statelessness is that currently there is no aligned solution. So what we're doing now is that we are developing a digital solution for how a so-called statelessness determination procedure could look like. So what are the steps that need to be taken by the applicant, by the status applicant, but also by the state, in order to then recognize the legal identity of a stateless person. And we are now doing this for Germany in the framework of German law, but also in the framework of international law. And our goal is obviously that this at some point will be adopted by other countries. What we're noticing in this process now, because we're doing this open source, we want to make sure that the different experiences and perspectives and the knowledge from other countries is embedded into that work, that this is a challenging process, because on the EU level, nobody so far has actually making sure that there is an aligned solution for stateless people. So I see we have the same goal of making sure that there is alignment and that people who are affected can get the same protection regardless of where they are at and where they are based. But at the same time, we also have the struggle of making sure there are different perspectives with each person you talk to, and there are different policy makers and decision makers that we need to convince at the same time.
Well, I appreciate that there's a good potential for technology to help your cause. I would also like to shed some light on the pitfalls that technology offers. You both need to provide evidence. What about deepfakes?
Very, very good question. So I'm a huge fan of technology, obviously, because I'm working in this field. But technology doesn't replace human interaction. Especially in my field, it can't offer one-on-one consultation. It can't offer the safety of a women's shelter, for example. And I will tell you a story about a conversations I had with a federal judge. And she told me that they had a case of a woman who was raped severely by their partner. And she was so hurt that she went to the hospital, and the hospital then documented everything. And the court actually thought, okay, we have the guy, which was her partner. And they're really strongly very confident that they will actually put him behind bars. But he was in tech. So what happened then, that at one point within the court, he basically gave his attorney an audio file, and in this audio file you can listen to the woman who was raped, and she says, oh, I wasn't raped, I just like to have rough sex, blah, 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 blah. And the court couldn't actually prove that it was deepfake. So what happened then? The case was dismissed. And now the police is actually looking into it, that she made false statements. So this is a huge problem because it undermines justice. When justice, especially on the governmental level, can't prove that technology was used against justice. So, yeah.
Wow. I think it's so important that we have people who support causes like that to help create a technical solution to prove that maybe like a deepfake is a deepfake, to really help justice be served. Yeah. Do you have something to share?
I mean, for us, one of the issues we share in that sense is that those who are suppressed are not those that people believe. So you already are fighting in a system that has a narrative of everything you say isn't really true. I mean, what is often overlooked when it comes to the recognition of statelessness is that there is historical data and legislative facts. So it's a bit of a different issue because it is like the oppressor in the case of stateless people is another state, right? And there are various reasons for statelessness, and that is also discriminatory law. We know that in over 24 countries, women don't have the same right to pass on citizenship to their children. And what is lacking in the local administrations is that local administrations don't know that. So the person that works in the administration maybe doesn't know that the Iranian woman who has given birth to a child that is not recognized by the father because it was born out of wedlock, but is now born in Germany where you get citizenship by descent and not by birthright, that person has the power to decide whether or not the statelessness of the child is being recognized. And if that person doesn't have the knowledge, then the person ends up, like the child ends up as a child without recognition and then grows up in a country that doesn't allow them to belong to where they were born. So for us, what helps, in a sense, is that there is legislation, and that just needs to be visible, so technology can help us to structure and provide this information so that people who make decisions are actually enabled to review applications in a way more informed way, because it's also like human beings don't have the competency to know legislation, citizenship acts from over 195 countries. That's just not possible.
If you had 3 wishes for free, let's play that. What would that be? What could help you boost your cause and help to get the solution out as fast as possible and spread it and grow?
So maybe like overarching, I just want to say I want people to realize that this is something that matters for all of us, because we are living in times in which it's getting harder and harder to get citizenship, but easier to lose it. Fascism is on the rise. Political conflict is a reason for statelessness. So even if you might not be affected now, your children or grandchildren might be affected at some point. What could help us is partnership. We want to pilot the determination procedure that we're developing now next year with real cases. So if you work in the area of migration, asylum, if you work in the local administration, we're looking for pioneers who want to test what we are developing. And the second, obviously, is also resources. We are a nonprofit, and we are convinced that we need to invest into a world that allows everyone to have access to human basic rights, regardless of whether or not they have citizenship or are stateless.
And for you, what kind of context would be useful for you to help you, Stefanie?
I mean, we were invited, thanks to you, to this conference, and it's, for me especially, it's quite crazy because I see who's here and who's talking, and I think that especially with organizations like ours, normally we're not invited to the table, although we're doing tech, and we're doing governmental tech or social tech, but it's, for most of the people, it's not that important because we don't create revenue, we don't make money, we're non-profit, but we are changing lives of people. So the first thing is that we are keep being invited to those rooms and sit at the table with the people. And for us, especially in our organization, we need people to open doors. Do you know someone in the government in Denmark, for example, or do you know someone in another European country? So we can implement our idea, because we are very successful doing it since now 5 years. And I think that especially realizing that there are so many people affected, that we all know people who are affected, and we all know people who actually abuse. We do know people who put women or people through those violence and actually hurt them and in times actually kill them. So I think that those are my three wishes.
Okay.
Yes.
So while we wait for all those people that can help you to line up and meet you afterwards, what's next for you in the next 3 months? What are the plans? How to go on?
Our plan is actually to soft launch our the first MVP version of the statelessness determination procedure. And so hopefully by the beginning of next year, we can actually start partnerships with the first German cities who already mentioned that they're interested. At the same time, we are in conversations with policymakers in Germany, making sure that we strengthen the political will and strengthen that understanding of why this is important for Germany. So that's on our timeline.
Stefanie, you already mentioned that you have a second state interested. Can you tell us which state it is, or is it still confidential?
Not yet, because they're working on a parliamentary resolution, actually, which is quite big. But yes, so the next 3 months will be, I will travel to the country, I will meet a lot of politicians and ministers, yes, but also to gather more functions, technology functions for our app to understand more, to help people who are affected, and to actually one day, I think in 10 years, I really hope that the app will used for every person affected in the world.
So one last sentence by each of you, please. What kind of learning, advice, or whatever would you like to give to the audience who might have an idea for something that also tackles a structural problem?
Me first? I mean, when you said one sentence, I was like, I just want to make sure that everyone takes away that we need to co-create a world in which belonging is not defined by the state, but belonging is defined by us as a society. And then at the same time, if there's an issue that you have observed, have the courage to find the right people to join you in that mission, because we need more of that. And it is also in our hands to co-create the world that we want to live in.
Our world will be a better place if we learn to be more nice to each other, and to have solidarity, even when you don't understand people's life, but to understand people and try to help them to have a better future.
Excellent, thank you so much. I think that wraps it up, that we need more humanity back in tech. Thank you all for being here.